Thanks for joining us today on a conversation about daily spiritual practices. We'll share ours with you and tell you how to cultivate your very own. We'll also be sharing a practice of the Examen and giving you all the details on why we think it's valuable, why we practice it, and how you can easily practice it, as well as sharing why retreat is so hard but really matters. So we're going to be starting with introducing ourselves. I'm Jenn Giles Kemper. I'm a minister's kid turned minister, and then got into spiritual direction and eventually became an entrepreneur. But my heart as a minister didn't go away. So I'm really thrilled that now I get to kind of live at the intersection of those, which I'm so grateful for. I lead a little company called Sacred Ordinary Days, and we create modern resources for Christian spiritual formation with an eye for beauty and accessibility. And most of our resources center around the liturgical calendar. Because of my love of this, I wanted to continue the conversation after we debuted our liturgical day planner, Sacred Ordinary Days, just this last fall. And when I wanted to start having more of a conversation around these ideas and seasons and themes, I knew the person that I wanted to continue to have that conversation with, and that is Lacy. So, Lacy, tell us about you.
Yeah, I am so glad we've been having these conversations, Jen, because I know the liturgical calendar is an inspiration to us both from the beginning, and these conversations have only deepened that inspiration for
Absolutely.
me. For those of you who are new to me, I'm Lacy Clarke Ellman, and I am a spiritual director and write about spiritual formation and our spiritual journeys, both at home, through the seasons of the church calendar and seasons of life, as well as abroad on pilgrimage at my website, asacredjourney.net. There you'll find a growing collection of resources for your journey, from my book, Pilgrim Principles, which is a rule of life for journeying with intention in everyday life, as well as my online course, 31 Days to a Meaningful Morning, which I know we'll talk about daily rituals coming up here soon, and my journey shop, where you'll find my Sacred Seasons liturgical wall calendar, as well as a new collection of wearable prayer beads, something you can incorporate into your daily practice. Today we're with you via video instead of our usual podcast for a few reasons. First, we wanted you to be able to see our faces and match our voices, finally, with our faces to connect a bit more than the podcast allows. And since we're filming this from two locations, I am in Seattle.
I'm in Waco, Texas.
We might have a bit of trouble with our connection from time to time, so if something happens, stick around and we will be back soon. And if you have any questions that pop up as you watch this, be sure to ask them in the Facebook group, the Sacred Ordinary Days Tribe Facebook group, and we will be happy to answer them, whether it's about spiritual practices, retreats, the Examen, or our upcoming retreat. If you're not already in there, you can join us at facebook.com/groups/Sacred Ordinary Days Tribe.
Absolutely. And the second reason is that we want to share why a daily spiritual practice matters so much. More specifically about what ours looks like and how you can cultivate your own. Lacy has created a whole course around this, and we've discussed it in the podcast, of course, but it matters. It's a foundational building block for everything else, and so we felt like it deserved its own moment in the sun, if you will. We also planned to come to you by webinar rather than a pre-recorded video, and so I just thought I'd mention that this is a perfect example of why this matters. Sometimes things just don't work out the way you planned, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so having spiritual practices in place that create an anchor help make those moments of chaos less painful and dramatic and allow you to incorporate them and move on in some healthy ways. So perfect example right here if you have witnessed any of our webinar frustrations with technology.
That's why the practice of Examen is important too, and what it has taught us is basically discernment in those moments of chaos, especially for us to be able to stop and say, like we did earlier today, we can't keep going with this. We just want to give this message to you, these resources to you, what feels most spacious, most life-giving in this moment. So we're going to talk about why we both use and recommend the Examen, as well as how to easily practice it and actually practice it a little bit live here.
Which I'm really excited about. It'll be neat to have that shared practice with you guys. And last, we really wanted to share with you how daily spiritual practices and a seasonal or annual practice of retreat go together and why they matter. We also wanted to name the fact that it's hard, even for us, even as we were discussing the name of this webinar. Originally, it was like, why you should go on retreat. And then we both admitted that it's really hard for each of us.
We think we should, but that doesn't mean we always do.
Absolutely. And so we wanted to name that it's hard and share with you some of the reasons it's been hard from us and hear why it might have been hard for you, and then offer you a solution for joining us on a retreat in May if it fits with the season of life that you're in. So, tell us about you. Why do you think spiritual practice matters, and specifically a daily spiritual practice?
Oh, definitely. Well, if you've been to my site at all, you know I talk about daily practice a lot, and as you said, created a whole course on it. And I think it's essential. It gives us an opportunity to pause throughout the day or each day, however your practice looks. And it's an opportunity for a mini Sabbath throughout the week, a time to return and remember our intention, return to the presence of God, and return to who we are at our deepest part, our true selves. And it encourages us to start each morning. I'm a morning person, and so I know that if I don't do it in the morning, it might not happen. And so I love that doing it in the morning helps me lay a spiritual foundation for the day ahead. What about you, Jen?
Yeah, I think the same for me. It creates an anchor, a constant and a center that you can return to in the many seasons of life. It helps me to be both active and receptive and to cultivate both postures in my own spiritual formation, because we know that as we grow, it's not all us. It is the grace and the Spirit of God within us, but we're also a part of it, and so it helps me to hone my posture in both of those ways. And as you said, it helps me craft a foundation, so that in moments of crisis, I'm not, for example, learning to pray for the first time. You wouldn't run a marathon without ever running before. You wouldn't, there's so many things that we do that it takes a long time to get good. And while spiritual practices aren't about perfecting, they are about cultivating a posture. And
I feel like showing up is a good way to
describe it. Yeah, it's about showing up and learning how to listen, learning how to know yourself and know God, so that you have some ways of noticing that are established. So what does your daily spiritual practice include?
Yeah, well, it in the past has included some form of reading, silence, and prayer. And for me, that for the past few years has been centering prayer, which is a silent prayer of really resting in the presence of God. And prayer beads as well, which I'm selling now in my journey shop on Etsy. And always it includes hot tea or coffee. Need that first thing in the morning. And I find that I am drawn to nature, so near a window or outside. And wherever it is, whether it's a corner in my living room or, visiting family and I've got a hole up in my bedroom, something, I definitely want it to be a place that feels spacious to me.
Yeah.
And currently, I am beginning the Ignatian Exercises, which the Examen is part of, with my spiritual director, and that requires an hour of prayer. And so it's been interesting to, even though, you could say my spiritual practice, daily spiritual practice was prayer before, to have that new perspective. And so it's got a bit of savoring and silence. I like to sip my coffee and look out on my garden, because so often I have a tendency to let my coffee go cold. And so really cherish that as a nourishment, as a spiritual practice. I've been doing morning pages from Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, and playing a Taizé song, "Oh Lord, Hear My Prayer," after that, which kind of turns my mind wanderings, which are always present, into something sacred and into prayer. And then I follow that with poetry or blessing. from some of my favorite guides, and centering prayer, as I mentioned before.
That's great. Yeah,
How about you?
In the past, I have tried to have a more severe, structured approach.
Mm-hmm.
And while that works really well for a lot of people, for a lot of great reasons, in the last couple of years, the more I come to know myself, the more I realize that is not the most nourishing, life-giving approach to a daily practice for me. That while I need a daily practice to carve some time and space for myself, for center, for divine attentiveness and presence, what I don't need is this really long list of shoulds and oughts that kind of got ingrained in me. And so part of my practice has been letting go of that sense of expectation and noticing what really is life-giving and what does bring me into the presence of God. And so for me, that's I'm in a season of crafting something new.
Yeah, that feels like a practice within itself.
Absolutely, absolutely. My husband Grant has joined our business as of about a month ago now. And so before, he left the house every morning about 6. And my mornings were my own. I didn't have to talk to anybody if I didn't want to, or deal with anybody else in the house. And then I got to the office and my designer, Haley, was there. Well, now Haley is in Fort Worth and Grant's at home, so things are shifting, and I'm trying to notice that rather than having that white-knuckled grasp that I've had in the past. And so I've got a new chair, and I'm rearranging my spot in the living room. Got a new candle after my last one burnt just in the last couple of days of Lent, actually. And what has been consistent is that I'm reading from Common Prayer, a liturgy for ordinary radicals, which I really, really love. And I love sharing that with people on the nights that we host small group, or with my husband and other extended family members from time to time. And then the other thing is that when I read Common Prayer, I just substitute the daily office, which we've got in our planner, for the texts in Common Prayer. And that works really well. And then I just trade between the other tools in my toolkit, so to speak, the other spiritual practices that speak to me or are a good fit for a certain season.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. And I know that we want to offer you some tools to help you begin to develop your own spiritual practice too.
Yes.
In my online course, 31 Days to a Meaningful Morning, I talk about 4 basic pillars, tenets, whatever you'd like to call it, to a daily practice, a morning ritual, and that's intention, practice, space, and time. And so with intention, what I'm talking about is what brings you here. What do you want to receive as you begin to reflect on what your intention is? For practice, how will you connect with the divine? And how will you connect with your true self? And like with what Jenn was saying, that changes from time to time and maybe day to day. And so you could also approach that with a toolkit and see where that takes you with each practice. Space, and we've both definitely talked about that, where is a peaceful, private space that you can claim as sacred even for a moment. And how will you make it your own for that time? And then what is essential is time. How much time do you have? How much time do you need? And how will you draw boundaries around your time to ensure that you will return? How will you claim that time as sacred and begin it and end it with intention? What would you add, Jenn?
Yeah, beyond that, I would say that, again, it comes back to the other postures that you bring. And so some that we want to encourage you to consider and maybe reapproach your spiritual practice with are curiosity and wonder. Also creativity and your hunger. That if you bring one or even all 4 of those elements, that will give you a really great soil for your spirit plant to flourish, so to speak. And then the other rubric that is helpful for me to keep in mind is thinking about my true self versus my false self, and noticing what parts of me are really in either category. We have talked about that more in several of the podcast episodes, but I know that for me, it's helpful to go through thinking about where I'm at emotionally, physically, spiritually, and in my life at home and in my life outside of and beyond my home, whether that's work or school for you, or maybe your involvement in your church and larger community. Bring that, who you really are, to your daily spiritual practice and trust that it's enough. So if who you really are in that moment is an exhausted mom that needs some extra sleep, or a harried worker bee that hasn't had a vacation or a time that you weren't on the clock mentally in ages, that's okay. Bring that and trust that that's enough for you and for God.
Yeah. One easy place to start with the daily practice, as well as figuring out what you want your daily practice to be. And I would add, discerning between the true self and false self, and also those shoulds that Jenn mentioned earlier when it comes to your own practice, is the Ignatian practice of Examen. We've mentioned already in this conversation. We also touched on a bit in the podcast, if you have been listening along. The Examen provides us with an opportunity to look back on our days and find that sacred thread, the things that shimmer more brightly in retrospect. And it helps us appreciate and focus on places of consolation, where we felt near to God, near to our true selves, and desolation, where we felt the furthest away, and gives us the opportunity to lean into and learn from and pray into those places.
Yeah, and for me, beyond that, it just gives me a trellis. I actually use it alongside the rule of life that I've cultivated, and it allows me to kind of discern how I am or am not living into my intention and my hope of continuing my formation towards Christ-likeness. The Examen is how I approach my weekly pages in the planner, the reflect and reset that I do once a week and that we have built into our planner.
And Jenn, I know you haven't mentioned it yet. People can still get the PDF of the planner, can't they?
Yeah, actually, if you go to sacredordinarydays.com and enter your email address, you can get our free Sacred Ordinary Days Essentials Workbook, which includes one whole week, so you can see what I'm talking about with the reflect and reset. It also has all of the seasonal pages, which involves a reflect and a reset for each liturgical season. And then if you like that, you absolutely can go to gumroad.com/sacredordinarydays. And I hope sacredordinarydays.com in the next week. I haven't told anybody else this, but our website is launching April 1st. Yay, finally. And you can get a PDF that holds you over until our next printed edition of the planner is available if you find any of these tools helpful for you. But having this weekly practice of Examen and doing the reflect and reset allows me to distinguish, it helps me to discern my calling, I should say, and also helps me not to forget or just fail to notice where God is and isn't, and where God might like to be invited in my days. So we're actually going to practice this together today, and I'm really delighted that Lacy is going to be our guide through this.
Yes. And we are going to practice it live together, and I'm going to move through it more quickly than usual, just so we can keep our conversation going. So I'll just pause for a few moments in between each part of the exercise, but feel free to literally pause the video.
Yes.
And spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes exploring each in depth for yourself, and come back, press play when you're ready to continue.
Absolutely.
But as we are gathering here today, close your eyes, settle in, feet on the ground if that feels comfortable to you, and arrive here in your body, in the presence of yourself and the presence of the divine. the first step of the Examen is to become aware of the presence of God. Settle in with a few deep breaths and invite the sacred guide. I like to refer to the Holy Spirit as the sacred guide who guides us on our journeys. Invite that sacred guide to join you in this place. The next step is to review the day with gratitude. Traditionally, the Examen is done at the end of the day, but you could also do it at the beginning of the day, looking back on the day previously, or even the morning, the afternoon, wherever you are as you're practicing. Look back on recent events and where your heart has been during that time. Walk through that time in the presence of God, noting its joys and delights, its places of consolation, where you felt near to God, filled with life, near to yourself, and desolation, where you felt lost, where you felt distracted, where you felt far from the place where you want to be. And as you go through your day, the next step is to pay attention to your emotions. What comes up in you? Reflect on the feelings you experienced during the day with a spirit of curiosity, like Jenn mentioned. Wondering what the divine and your true self might be saying through these feelings. Wondering where the sacred thread might be in both the times of consolation and also desolation. And as you go through your day and your emotions, choose one snapshot, one feature of the day, and pray from it. And as you choose, I encourage you to move slowly through that process, not just choosing automatically what stands out the most to you, but pay attention also to something you might have missed, passed by, that has wisdom to share. And then when you've captured it, bring it into the presence of the divine in prayer, asking for direction, for sacred wisdom, for whatever you need and the needs that you're not aware of. And the final step is to look toward tomorrow. Saint Benedict, in his rule, says, always we begin again. And if spiritual practice and retreat isn't about that, then I don't know what is. Rest in the insight that you have received. And as your practice comes to a close, take that intention with you into the rest of the day or the day that follows. And if you're not ready to exit this time yet, please stay there in the presence of God. We will be here when you come back. Just pause this until you're ready to rejoin us. Or if you're ready to move on, keep on playing as we continue the conversation.
You know what Examen most often shows me is my need for activity, for speed, for distraction and entertainment.
Yeah.
That's why silence is so scary and hard, and why both daily spiritual practice and retreat can be so hard, because they show you to yourself. There's no hiding when you're there in stillness and silence. It creates a longing and hunger to go deeper as well, and creates in me a desire to set aside more time and space to explore and to rest. And that's what times of retreat are for. to explore and go deeper into your true self, into who God created and called you to be, who God is, and how those interplay with one another, as well as resting and being restored. That's why Sabbath is so important. We have this balance as an ice cream truck goes by at the end of the workday. We have this balance between
call to rest, right?
yeah, between work and play, rest and the day to day. But if I'm being honest, there aren't many opportunities for retreat that always feel doable with my time, my schedule, my budget, and my other list of things that I prefer to have in a retreat setting. And so I tell myself, as many of us do, that I'm just going to set aside time for retreat by myself, or maybe I'll meet with some friends and we'll just have a weekend retreat together. But the reality is it's hard, and that doesn't happen nearly as often as I know I need, or as often as I would like. So I don't know. What about you, Lacy? Why do you think setting aside time for retreats hard for you?
I think I was saying, yeah. I was in such agreement with you. The things for me that always get in the way, timing, always say next month, or next week, or year, whatever it is for you, or tomorrow, even with a spiritual practice, daily spiritual practice, I'll do it tomorrow. Location, just, I certainly have desires in the location that I want to spend time in for a retreat, but also even not knowing where to go as well. Not knowing about the places around me that are open for that. Cost is definitely a big one. And perhaps justifying the cost is a conversation to have as well, just with yourself, not putting enough value on that time. And as you were saying, that resistance to that open space, to the silence. And I think having a misunderstanding of our deepest needs, not knowing that, as you said, that Sabbath rest, it goes hand in hand. We can't be in one the whole time without becoming depleted.
Absolutely.
So when you're presented with an opportunity to retreat, what do you look for, Jen?
Yeah, I look for, I'm most excited about retreats that blend things that I'm familiar with, maybe people or place or practices, with something that's new. And I like a little bit of both personally. And I also want retreats that, again, I learn something new and I'm actually getting to practice it. It's not just all in my head, but I'm fully engaged with it. And then something that gives me an opportunity to make real connections, whether it's with a teacher that I want to learn from and study under, or fellow retreatants that I feel like there's a real chance for a relationship, or even just, a real connection with God that is deeper than a lot of retreat experiences leave me thinking will probably happen if I'm there. I also really appreciate a beautiful setting and really good food. I think it matters. I just don't think that there is any reason to eat food that doesn't taste good.
It's kind of like using that rubric again. I know you have like home, body, mind, relationships. And so it's a retreat from the everyday in each of those aspects.
Absolutely.
Which is it could be a great rubric to creating your own retreat.
Absolutely. Or even crafting your own rubric for what matters to you and what you're looking for, whether it's with a spiritual practice or a retreat. And I really appreciate a schedule that feels gracious. I know you use the word spacious a lot, but gracious and hospitable are two words that really resonate for me. I want to show up knowing that I'm spending time and energy and money to come to something that is thorough and thoughtful and really well prepared from start to finish, but that also gives me and the other retreatants space within it to craft something that is personal and that really meets the need that I have at that moment. What about you?
Yeah. Well, speaking of that spaciousness, that graciousness, I think for me, definitely a daily rhythm. is something that I value, whether it's on my own personal retreat and I craft it myself, or I'm being guided by others. I like that sense of spaciousness, slowness, stillness, time for silence, time to participate. And also, I'm always so grateful for the invitation to listen to my needs and to draw back in case I want. Sources of inspiration are essential for me. Time for reflection, sacred connection, so that I can go home fed, like you were just saying. And then location, nature, of course, if I'm drawn to it in my daily practice, it's certainly something essential for me on retreat. And that's a way you can start paying attention to what would be valuable for you. What are you drawn to in your daily practice, and how can you expand that? And then, of course, my connection to journey, my language of pilgrimage that is always with me. I love to know that I'm not only going for a set time, but that there's some sort of theme that I can prepare for, that I can be guided by while I'm there on retreat, and that I can take home with me too, to reintegrate and integrate all that I have learned into my everyday life.
Yeah. Well, friends,
so
if you've been listening, sorry.
We were just going to say the same thing.
It's true. It's true. We're both segueing.
If you've been listening to our podcast this season, you've heard us talk a lot about our upcoming retreat from the very first episode. We knew that we wanted to have the conversations that began online into conversations around a real table with our coffee or tea, as we always say in the introduction, and in person. And I'll add that we will be meeting at the retreat for the first time.
It's true. Too. We're really excited.
We so believe that conversation is richer in context of relationship. And while our relationships are beautiful and deep in the Facebook group and on social media, and we still know that there's something about being together in real life that is richer. And so that's why we're doing this. That's why we announced this even before our conversations began. We knew we would want to be together in person, not just Jen and me, but you. We want to invite you into the sacred time of retreat with us. So the first Sacred Ordinary Days retreat is going to be over Memorial Day weekend. It's the last weekend in May in Waco, Texas. And our time together is going to feature connection, as we said, with Sacred Ordinary Days tribe members and with us too. We're looking forward to connecting.
Absolutely.
Great food and fellowship. I know that's Jen mentioned the food. Spiritual practice and guidance. As we've both said, we are both spiritual directors, and we look forward to interacting with you, not only around the table, but in that way as well. Time for reflection, meaningful ritual, and shared experience. Resources and tools to make ordinary time extraordinary, because we'll just have been starting ordinary time together. And finally, inspiration to return home with, and to help you infuse your everyday life with spirituality and intention. You take it from here, Jen.
Yeah, we'll be using these conversations, the ones that we've been having on social media, in the Facebook group, and even by email. I know Lacy and I have both gotten a lot of personal emails for you in response to each of our weekly newsletters. And those things have not gone in one ear and out the other. Those will be the foundation for how we're moving forward with our retreat planning and the retreat itself. And we've heard from you what your concerns are and what you're excited about, and we've kept those all in mind. Right now, tickets are $100, and then we've got a meal on Friday night and one on Saturday night that will be our coming meal and our sending meal, so two bookends. And those are $25 each until April 1st. So we are... we'll leave this up until April 1st, and then on April 1st at about 8 p.m. Central Time, when I am going to pour myself a glass of wine and click that it switches over, then tickets will be $150 for the Saturday retreat and $30 for each of the meals. So that means that your expense will go from $150 to $210. We've got we've been checking flights, and you can get a flight into DFW or Dallas Love Field, and then head south to Waco. You can fly directly into Waco. The airport code is ACT, or you can fly into Austin, which is my personal favorite when I'm flying in and out. You can also fly into Killeen or College Station Airport, all of which are close. And then once you get to Waco, we've got something really, really special. We'll be hosting the retreat at my church, DaySpring Baptist Church in Waco. Yeah, we weren't planning on having it there. And then so many of you asked if they were like, folks have said, we really want to see this weird, contemplative, liturgical Baptist church and what it's all about. And we have really beautiful grounds. Yeah, Lacy wants to see it too. So we'll be hosting it there. But then rather than having you stay in a hotel or several other more disparate feeling lodging solutions, we have actually had several local members of our Sacred Ordinary Days tribe offer to host our further away members. And I feel like I'm going to get a little bit emotional here, which just feels really, really beautiful to me. So
it reminds me of sponsoring almost your time here.
Yeah.
Inviting you into their Sacred Ordinary Days and sending you off.
And it feels real, it feels like it embodies hospitality, and it's real people extending their real tables and real guest rooms with you. So at this point, I have got beds and space for 24 people. And our hope is that the retreat is very intimate and that there are opportunities for really meaningful connection and conversation, which is why we're keeping it small. And in fact, we're only going to be allowing 36 retreatants grand total. And we've got about a third of those, maybe a little bit more at this point, filled already, which is so exciting. And if you come, you will be in excellent company with some really, really lovely people. I know maybe about a third of the folks who've registered so far, maybe a little bit more than that. And then, of course, our local hosts. But the others, as I've interacted with you after you registered or asking questions in the Facebook group, there's really kind, interesting, fun people that you will be glad to be around in real life. And I think so far that we have someone in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. I'm not sure about 70s. I'll have to check, but we also got, it could be you. We've also got men and women coming. And so I hope that you will consider joining us and that you'll do it sooner rather than later, because once those 24 beds fill up, it'll be, well, they'll be gone. And then like I said, we only have 36 tickets total. So please join us. You can do that at sacredordinarydaysretreat.eventbrite.com, or you can just Google Sacred Ordinary Days Retreat, and it's one of the top ones that pops up. So again, sacredordinarydaysretreat.eventbrite.com. And rather than having the chat boxes open, since our technology conspired against us, it seems, we'll be answering questions, Lacy and I both, in the Facebook group. And you're also welcome to send an email to hello@sacredordinarydays.com, and Grant or Haley or I will answer. And I really hope that you'll consider being one of the folks there with us around our real table.
Ask for those questions. Ask us questions about the retreat, but feel free to ask us questions about anything else we've talked about today too. We'd love to continue the conversation, as we always say.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you'll join us online in the Sacred Ordinary Days Tribe Facebook group. Again, that's facebook.com/groups/Sacred Ordinary Days. Got it all right?
Sacred Ordinary Days Tribe.
That's it.
Yep.
And of course, in person at our retreat in May.
Thanks so much. I know it's a big deal to share with us half an hour of your time, whether it's in our weekly podcast episodes or a little more. whether it's in our weekly podcast episodes or here on this. We really treasure the time that you share with us, and we do our best to make sure that it is time really well spent, but that still feels gracious, spacious, and hospitable to you and where you are. So thanks. We'll see you there. Blessings.